Ladies and gentlemen, 2 weeks ago I was on a conference up in the very north of Norway, Tromsø. It was Nordic Finance Innovation, and we talked about identities, we talked about biometrics, and we talked a lot about trust. And two guys that were participating in that event was Chris Skinner and David Birch. And basically, the first day we talked about, this, trust. What is trust? Really? I mean, in this digital world, a lot of new things are happening very, very quickly. But we are, in a sense, also still in the old world. I mean, how was that introduced to us in our lives from the very beginning? I mean, normally you actually introduced your son or your daughter into some people, to the society, and you were introduced as a trusted person. You belong to some family, and you were belonging to some trusted person. So it was very much about introducing to people and to society. So how do you get trust? And how do you trust people? These are very, very deep and actually difficult questions, and especially in this modern society that we are living in right now. $1.5 billion people lack proof of legal identity today. And without proof of identity, people may be denied access to rights and services. It's almost impossible to be involved in the society without a digital identity, without having the credentials actually to do things. Trust is easy when you can see someone. Going back to that picture I showed you, when you're introducing somebody that you can actually meet in life. And that is also going back to how it has been working within the banking system for decades. That you have to enter into a branch office. You have to be there in person. And you have to have a name, becoming a trusted person. So, who do you trust? In Sweden, we have something called we have Bank ID. And that solution is used by 7.5 million people out of the total population of 10 million. More than 97% of the adult population are using this Bank ID. And we basically use this every day. This product has been in the market since early 2000. So as soon as I'm supposed to log into a bank or do a transaction, or if I'm going to log in to the authorities, or even to log into a web page in basically any company in Sweden, I just add my personal number, and then I get a notification and I approve that one, and then I am logged in and I'm verified. So it's when the technique is in place, it's very simple to verify that you are you in any occasion. And by having this, this has also helped Sweden to become one of the most, or perhaps the most cashless society in the world. The guy on the left-hand side, Peter, he was the brain behind BankID originally. He was the architect behind that solution. He worked for that project for 4 years. BankID was launched back in 2003, and he saw already then what was coming, but it took actually some years before it really took off. 2007, 95% of the population was aware about this BankID, but not that many people were using it, approximately 20%. Then the iPhone was launched back in 2007, and things started to happen, as you all know. The mobile version of the BankID was launched in 2010. When it comes to the mobile BankID, it has really been an enabler for digitalization in the whole country. We have seen, as an example, all the fintech companies that we have in Sweden, more than 400, they have actually been able to develop their business and to interact with the money and actually get quicker to market thanks to this solution that is so widely spread. What we have seen also was that, this can be something that you actually build and you authorize from the authorities. But in Sweden, it was actually the banks who got together and decided that we should not compete about security. We should not compete about how people identify themselves. So they started to build this. And we have seen that the banks has been crucial when it comes to onboarding, both from a KYC perspective, but also from a distribution channel point of view. And about transactions, something happened back in 2012, and that was when the instant payment solution, Swedish, was launched. All of a sudden, the usage of my mobile BankID went up from 20% up to 90%. And we see the numbers here in transactions. 2015, we had 1 billion transactions on the platform. 2017, 2.5, and now this year we'll reach 4 billion transactions per year. So, volume is key. Back to the trust issue again. Since we have this in the market, there is obviously a lot of trust. When it comes to the onboarding, when we go and enter into a new country, of course there's differences between in legislation, and it's depending on the different counterparts that you're working with, or risk view, or kind of business that you're doing. So basically, the solution in itself can be implemented to a country, can be implemented on a bank, or a fintech, or a telecom company. The importance is that the processes has to be customized depending on the risk view the counterpart actually have. And trust, as we have been talking about, is very much about appearance, behavior, and reputation. So there's one thing that sticks out here, and that is the part about reputation. Everything is quite easy to fake today, but your reputation, that is harder to fake. Some key findings in this. We are all stakeholders in it. And volume is key, as I have mentioned, to actually be successful when actually launching a digital identity. So how do you create awareness? How can you distribute it and onboard it in the society? And how do you actually get people to start using it? From our experience, we saw that there was very useful to have some kind that was launched in combination with the digital identity in Sweden that actually sparked and took off. And both authorities, banks, and people will actually benefit from this kind of solution. Back to the original point, Bank ID, the founder, Peter, who actually founded Covr Security, the 2.0 version of the Bank ID, his mind has always been focusing on the next generation digital identity in banking security and how we can develop that. And there is a fine balance between security and convenience, or security or convenience. But actually, we believe today it's possible to actually have both. And that makes the next generation the right thing. So, back to where we started off, trust. Is this really you? And the question we discussed up in Tromsø in Norway was very much about, do we trust the banks? Do you trust the banks? Do you trust the authorities? Or is it the system that you trust? And of course, this really depends on the situation. In some occasions, you trust the persons. In some occasions, you don't. And today, we can use biometrics, as Claire showed earlier here, in many different ways. And it seems to be pretty secure. But it all comes down to the underlying system that you have in a digital identity platform. But if you can combine that together with biometrics, then you also will get a very, very convenient solution. Then you can add this. Differences between generations about trust. Millennials and Generation Z, due to the Telegraph in US, only 34% of US millennials and Gen Z trust banks. And that is, I mean, in these days, when new fintechs are coming, approaching the market, just pumping out their ideas, this is something to actually bear in mind. If that's the case in other countries as well, and I can for sure tell you that it's the case in Sweden and in Nordics and some of the European countries as well, one should be careful about what you do, how you do things, and what's next. And when it comes to biometrics, we believe that there are differences between the generations, and you have to just bear this in mind when it comes to new solutions, that you have to look into what kind of country, banks, fintechs, people is it that you're dealing with. And you have to have a security platform as a basic that is a bit adaptable depending on what counterpart that you are actually working with. But if you can combine that with biometrics, then the future looks really, really promising.